Hi everybody, I'm Steve Paikin, substituting for Cheryl Jackson, who's off with the flu today. If you have children, you know that they are wired. They use iPods and laptops and smartphones to get information. They interact with each other. Scientific research shows that all of this technology is literally rewiring our children's brains. Is this a good thing, or is technology dumbing down our kids? That's the subject of today's Your Voice. Hi again, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of Your Voice. We are live today from the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics in Waterloo, Ontario. We have an audience behind us today which will have its chance to ask questions of our assembled guests, whom I'll introduce in just a moment. But first, to get us started, a few statistics. The research firm Youthography teamed up with Microsoft, and they studied the technology consumption of Canadian children from ages 9 to 12. And here's some of what they found. They found that Canadian kids spend 1.7 hours a day online, 44% chat online, 36% use social networking sites, 72% use the net to do homework, and 91% play games online. 91%. Clearly, our kids are spending a lot of time online. What impact is this having in the way that they think and learn and behave? Three people with us today to help understand this issue. Mike Dover, he was the lead researcher on Don Tapscott's books, Growing Up Digital, The Rise of the Net Generation, and Grown Up Digital, How the Net Generation is Changing Your World. Also with us, journalist and documentary filmmaker Alison Armstrong. She's the author of The Child and the Machine, How Computers Put Our Children's Education at Risk. And finally, Julie Mueller, assistant professor at Wilfrid Laurier University's Faculty of Education here in Waterloo. Her research interests include the impact of computer technology on students as learners, and I welcome the three of you here. Actually, I don't have to welcome you. This is home for you, so you can welcome us if you like. Let's start with this. A bit of a provocative question to get it started. Is technology dumbing down our children? What do you say, Julie?
My first response is to think about two pieces of that question, and one is technology and what exactly are we defining as technology. It can range from standalone software, searching the internet, playing video games, creating websites, simulations. So that in itself is a broad definition. And also how we measure dumbing down. So if we are going to continue to measure our children's success in school with a spelling test and a math test that asks how fast they can calculate, or if they memorize the last 10 words in a book, and we consider that technology is doing those things for them and they can no longer do them, we might say it's dumbing down. But on the other hand, if we measure their intellectual success by how well they can evaluate, how well they are creating, how well they can analyze, then technology can be an incredible support, and kids are using it to create, share, and innovate.
Okay, Alison, what do you say on this one?
I would have to say, on balance, the amount of time kids are spending on the computer is not enhancing their education in any way. And the kind of thing that you've described at the beginning, playing games and doing Facebook, it really isn't doing any good for students in terms of their creative development or their critical thinking or their intellectual development. So I'd have to say it really depends on the age of the child and what they're using the technology for, but overall I'd say most of what they're doing is not helpful.
Mostly not helpful. Okay, Mike, what do you say?
Well, I'm so glad you said that, Alison, because I completely disagree. This will be fine. On balance, I think that, and our research shows that they're actually getting smarter. And I think that as a great example about the spelling test, they're probably worse spellers than the students would have been 20 years ago. But I'm a worse speller than I was 20 years ago, and here's why. I rely on the red squiggly line. So a lot of times when I'm working in Microsoft Word, I'll be lazy and I'll approximate a word that I just go over and right-click on it. So the amount of knowledge that's stored in their head, I think, is lower. And I think if it came up on, they would watch Jeopardy differently. They wouldn't necessarily be answering the question, but they would be Googling it and looking at Wikipedia afterwards to find out more about it. So they're better at scrutinizing, finding out whether something's actually true, and they're better at finding and searching for an answer. But they keep less in their head, and some skills are less important to them.
Mike, follow up on that, because we know the brain is more plastic now. in inverted commas, than we ever knew it to be before. How is all this technology rewiring or changing the brain? What does research say on this?
Well, there's two main parts or time periods in somebody's life when the brain has the greatest change. And originally, and this is brain science has developed a lot in the last 10 years, and originally it was thought that most of it is done right in the first 5 to 8 years. And it's fairly well known when it comes into how you're learning a language is much easier for a child, and getting a very fluent, non-accented language happens the most in that period. But there's another time period between ages of 12 and 24 when another part of the brain goes and develops, and that's when you're getting into your emotional intelligence, goal and reward systems.
Okay, we're really focusing today on the sort of 2 to 12 age range, so focus on that.
So growing into that, the amount of technology and the access to technology is a greater stimulator than we've had in the past. So the actual neural pathways and the synaptic pathways that develop are adapted to. There's more stimulus going into than I've ever seen before.
Okay, and Allison, are you sure that all of whatever's happening to the rewiring of children's brains between those ages can be blamed on technology as opposed to something else?
Well, I mean, everything is technology. A piano is a piece of technology. We have to focus in a little bit. What we do know is that children who learn to read and write using computer technology, actually, it doesn't enhance or improve their literacy skills at all. And in fact, it can be deleterious to their literacy skills, because the act of reading and comprehension is probably the single most important predictor of how well a child does academically throughout his or her life. And we know that when they use computers, if not exclusively, they really heavily rely on them to teach reading skills. It falls apart, it doesn't work. And the children's development is slowed down. So I think that's quite important. So it depends on the technology you're talking about, but mostly computer technology, the way it's used in elementary school education, isn't helpful. And there's no research to support that it has been tremendously successful from any standpoint.
Let me get Julie to follow up on that, because your opening answer was kind of balanced on the one hand, on the other hand. So give us the other hand now. Where do you see the downside of all of this technology leading?
Well, I think the downside is not the technology, but what the children aren't doing when they're chatting, when they are online on Facebook. I mean, it's natural for kids to want to be where their friends are. That hasn't changed. And their friends are on Facebook and texting on their telephone. But in school, I see computer technology as assisting in that learning. And certainly, as Mike mentioned, there's a period of development that children need to actually physically experience things. So a 2-year-old does need to actually mix a bowl of cake batter in the kitchen rather than a virtual game.
But 2-year-olds aren't on Facebook, I hope, anyway.
No.
Yeah. Not yet.
But our older kids in school, certainly, if they can use a software program to give them immediate feedback, accurate feedback, they never get tired, and it's motivating. If that helps them to decode and learn that part of reading, that frees up their cognitive load to do the more advanced skills of comprehension.
But Allison, would you go so far as to say that our children are actually losing certain skills that they may otherwise have had because of this indulgence in technology?
I think they're losing time doing other things. I think the brain is far more plastic than ever we imagined it to be. I think they're losing time. A child who's spending time on a computer instead of being outside, planting a garden, learning piano, doing art, I think it's time taken away from those things in the early years that are so crucial for our children. So it's not so much, and again, all these things are technology, they're just not computer technology. But in order to learn to read, which again is so important, children need auditory stimulation. Reading to a child is the most helpful thing to do. And children learn to read by decoding text, not looking at pictures. So one of the things that researchers discovered when they used these reading programs was that in fact it was a distraction. They were taking longer to learn how to read because they weren't decoding the text. They were distracted by the pictures and by the speed with which they were coming across the screen.
Mike?
Yeah, I think that's a crucial point about the time and what time is taken away from. And part of our research shows that typically the time spent on the computer isn't taking away from your soccer lessons or your piano lessons. It's taken away from just watching TV. And if you look at how these children generally interact, it becomes that when they're watching TV, they're doing other things as well. The TV may be on in the background.
All right, go. You wanted to follow on that,
I would
Alison.
like to say something about that. There's a lot of studies that are just coming out now about what we call multitasking. And I think one of the things that we're discovering is that doing two things at once often means you're not doing either thing particularly well at all, which is why people have accidents when they're driving and texting at the same time. And my concern for children is that when they're doing two things at once, they're not doing anything particularly well at all.
No,
Question in the audience here.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Dana Feinstone, and my question to the panel is regarding your views on how to best...
You know what, Dana? These work a lot better when you turn them on.
Okay.
So I just did that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So hello again, my name is Dana Feinstone, and my question to the panel is regarding your views on how to best integrate technology and early instruction with children, such as early literacy instruction.
Who do you want to tackle that?
Oh, any of the panel, but...
Julie, fire away.
Sure.
I'll address that, Dana. A very interesting question, because literacy is such an important skill. And really, we talk about learning to read and then reading to learn. And I think that technology can be a support in both of those areas. Certainly in learning to read, as I mentioned before, those early skills, and you're right, they need to decode the text, they need to be motivated, and a software program can do that for a child, and they can do it at home, they can use it in school, and if the software addresses a particular level, it can be individualized, it can give reinforcement right away to a child and free up a teacher in an early grade to work one-on-one with children, so that it can be a support and scaffold that early reading.
Alison, how about the physical health of children?
Well, it's the most overweight, out-of-shape generation in the history of the planet. There's no doubt of that.
And there's no doubt about the reason why.
Well, it's not just technology. I think parents are fearful, so they keep their children indoors more often, giving them greater access to TVs and computers than ever before. So you can't blame, you have to look at cultural values. I think you can't totally blame technology. But the body and the brain are integral. And what comes in through the senses is the limit of our consciousness is developed through the senses. So if children are only using the visual sense or the auditory sense, they're missing out on full body learning, which is so crucial, especially for young children. We know green space, just being the act of being in green space, can help children with attention deficit disorder, for instance.
Well, let me follow up on attention. Mike, have you got stuff that indicates, I mean, we hear it all the time, that the attention span of children today is not what it was a generation ago. Is that true?
Well, it is. We find that they have a quicker switching speed. So multitasking is actually a misnomer, because they're not actually doing two things. And you were implying this. They have to stop. The brain stops doing one thing and then has to give instruction to do something else. And a lot of them, especially gamers, can do a lot more things in a short period of time. But for activities that require very intense concentration, it is more difficult.
So is that a positive development?
It depends on what you're working on. So for example, and again getting back into gaming, some very, very complicated games, you have lots of information coming in at once. And people need to keep track of more, they need to keep track of things quicker, and they need to identify data in a cluttered environment. And you're often making decisions based on 95, 96% of the amount of information. That's appropriate in some tasks, but it wouldn't be, say, if you're doing a chemistry experiment, where something needs to be perfect. Or if you're going for a high level of music performance where you need full attention, that's where it becomes more difficult.
Right. We know, of course, today, Julie, that they communicate, young people do, with instant messaging and texting and Facebooking and all this kind of thing. And I'm wondering, what kind of effect does that have on their ability to have real relationships, not texting relationships, but real relationships? Have those skills to do that been affected because of the technology?
Well, certainly, children have more peripheral relationships, so that they have 400 friends on their Facebook account, and how you define friend
is different.
Really is different than somebody you have a deeper relationship with. But often their technology serves as a starting point for them, and they find friends who have something in common. They can learn about a culture across the world in a chat room or with a key pal. So they are growing up as global citizens.
Right.
And I think that it certainly makes them aware of who else is out there, and it doesn't bring them in.
Mike, that is one of the benefits of this, but on the other hand, you do hear the other side of it, which is young people today only know how to tweet, which means they can only express a 140-character thought, and their relationships don't go deeper than that as a result. Is that the downside of it?
Well, there's a lot of that statement. I would say that you can still have richer relationships because through this technology, the kids can meet kids they never would have met before. Whereas when you were 10, you were limited pretty much to the kids that lived on your block. And let's say you were interested in something that'd be unusual. Let's say you were a big origami or grafting cactus fan. You're more likely to find friends that you can have a deep relationship because of that. But when it comes into how communication styles, there's probably less experience on the phone. And you can get a lot more information, obviously, talking to somebody face-to-face or listening to them on the phone than just when you get into your texting.
Now, Allison, that is a fair point, isn't it? I know probably when we were younger, growing up, we did spend a lot more time on the telephone not doing homework. Mm-hmm. This generation is texting and playing video games, not doing homework. So have they just traded in their one poison for the other?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think to some degree, I think video games are new because the kids tend to play them in isolation. When we were children, we played together. And so I think that what we're looking at here is a radical departure in terms of how we interact. Again, I go back to young children because there isn't, we make this distinction with adults, but for young children, the emotional quality of their environment and the physical quality is as important as the intellectual. They're not separate. So if you have a bond with a teacher or with a friend in a group project, you're going to learn more because you're learning from that person, and there's an emotional quality, a richness that is there. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist. We had pen pals, but it's very different when you have 400 friends, and it's very different from when you're tweeting. Mm-hmm. You know, the depth is there's no comparison, really.
But you're saying different worse. We're also hearing different better. Would you acknowledge there's different better in this as well?
There may well be. I think the jury is out on that yet, but certainly there are advantages to internet pals. There's nothing wrong with that at all. You know, my daughter, has corresponded with people around the world since she was fairly young on the computer, and that's a terrific experience. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't spend a lot of time one-on-one with friends, you know, here as well.
Julie, what new skills? We've talked about some of the downside that Allison has identified. What new positive skills would technology lead young people to today?
Well, technology puts the learner in control. It gives children an opportunity to create and actually construct the knowledge rather than having it transmitted to them directly. So if we think of traditional teaching and the way many of our teachers were taught, it was the empty vase being filled with information, and children take technology and create programs. They find ways to create their own character and build who they are in a different way. And just going back, it evens out the playing field. So sometimes those relationships are deeper because they can write down, here's how I feel, and I don't have to be right in your face to say that.
And Mike, again, the thing you hear is that they're great multitaskers now because they can do homework, watch television, look at something on their computer, instant message with their friends, all at the same time. Are they doing all of those things well?
Well, I think that if you took the same child and you isolated those, that child would be better if they were doing fewer things, and becomes the same sort of parenting style that we had before, where you need to do it by kid. So say if you have 20 minutes of social studies homework, show to me that you can do that within 20 minutes.
I'm looking for Bram here. Where's here? Give me the microphone for a sec. Thank you very much. Are you Bram?
Yes, I am.
Hi there. Let me just sneak up beside you here,
Okay.
and you get the next question. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question that relates to learning styles. Physical hands-on experiences
Bram,
are...
that looks like a very long question. It's a half-hour show here. Can you
It is
kinda
a long
Can you
question.
sum that up a little more
All right.
succinctly, possibly?
Well, basically my question is this. Has the digital age actually created an environment where students are less likely to engage in do-it-yourself physical hands-on activities that were a standard cultural feature of past generations? And this is opposed to the virtual hands-on that we usually associate with computers.
Mike, you want to start with that?
Sure. I think it could, but if you had a child that was, let's say, was very interested in building a robot and doing woodwork and doing some sort of unusual art form, they would have a lot of help that they get in through the internet they wouldn't be able to have before. There's wonderful free online videos to build incredible things. And you actually would have your screen up there while you're doing it, and it would be similar to what I was talking about before. You are less likely to have somebody on your blog that would be able to teach you this than in the past of finding something that's just available.
Allison, you want to follow?
Well, I would just say in terms of, hands-on learning, that you don't have to go on, hands-on learning is building the robot. It's not getting the information out of the computer. Hands-on learning is building a green roof on a school or digging a garden. Hands-on learning is playing piano. Hands-on learning is singing in a group. So I think those experiences will never be replaced by technology.
Okay, another quick question from the back here.
Well, I think it's wonderful that there's so much information at everyone's fingertips. I think that there's a problem with the sense of discovery, where students can just look anything up on the internet and get the answer simultaneously. You don't have this scientific experience anymore. How do you feel about that?
Julie, is that accurate?
Well, the internet is not just a pile of information. Or technology is not. The information highway is there, but you can take other roads as well. So in terms of discovering, there's databases with hundreds and thousands of data points that kids can discover things. They can learn about the monarchs' migration patterns by taking data from across the world where children are putting up sightings and put that data together, and that's hands-on learning to discover how a monarch butterfly migrates. So
is that really hands-on learning? That's going to a computer.
Certainly.
That's not going, if you lived in Toronto, it's not going to the Leslie Street
They're
Spit to see
constructing
it.
that knowledge, and it's an information society. Certainly, there needs to be boundaries, and you aren't going to have your child only do that. You might go out into the playground and find monarch butterflies to support that same learning.
Allison?
Well, actually, I know the project you're talking about, and I think it's an excellent one. And it started out because, first of all, I think it was, 10 years ago, we discovered where the monarch butterfly hibernates in the winter in Mexico. People didn't know they were following the migration patterns of the monarch, and kids were going out into the field to find out where they were going and what they ate, and the teachers. And so what they did is they put this data, and I think it was elementary school kids, into the computer. So they were able to collectively trace the path of the monarch. Tremendous education, but it starts with kids going out and observing the butterfly in the natural environment. There's the beginning of the project.
Okay, less than 5 minutes to go here, and let's see if we can put forward some solutions to the people who are watching us right now. Technology is obviously here to stay. Mike, how best to use it?
Well, I think it gets back to normal good parenting, and you need to be finding how your child is interacting with the computer, know what they're looking at, know how they're using it. The computer, I see it's certainly for this age group, should be at the kitchen table. The rule in my house is no internet with the door closed. So just go and use it to...
No internet with the door closed. That's important advice. Eh?
It is. It really, it'll be more so as my daughter becomes a teenager, and there'll be a point where she'll stop letting me do that. But I think it can be joint discovery with your child.
Julie, at what age should children be having cell phones, internet with the door closed, that kind of thing?
Well, my 15-year-old daughter would tell you she's the only teenager in Canada that doesn't have a cell phone.
And she doesn't have one because?
In our house, it's not a necessary tool.
Okay. But most 15-year-olds do have them, right?
They do.
And is that appropriate?
That's, again, a parent's decision and the context of
Allison,
that
how
child.
about, should a 10-year-old have a cell phone?
I think our daughter was 12 when she bought her own cell phone because we refused to. So, and finally she's paying the bills for it now. But I think that it's really, parents just have to monitor this. They are here to stay. When your child goes to someone else's house, you have no control over whether or not they monitor the internet. You have to be a parent in every. I agree with our other guest. We have to be a parent in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah, hands-on parenting. Obviously, there's no substitute for that.
Substitute.
But people who are watching us want to get some sense from you experts about what the guidelines are. So, Mike, if you're 12 and you've got a cell phone, how much is an appropriate amount of time to be on that, texting, all of that kind of stuff?
Well, I think it'd be great if they have to earn it, and whether if they have a paper route or they do chores around the house, and get the sense of here's how much texting costs, and you would have a budget, they would go towards that. And also, you want to say, are you doing that at the table when you should be talking to us? And at the same time, the parent can't be on their BlackBerry doing their work as well.
Ooh,
So
yeah.
I think you really need to.
So what's
work
good
by
for the
example.
goose?
Absolutely.
Oh, darn.
Yeah.
That's going to be a problem. All right, we know that young people are going to be on their computers. They are a lot already. They're going to be probably increasingly so in years to come. Can you set rules about, all right, X number of minutes for video games, X number of minutes for IMing, X number of minutes for, is that reasonable to do?
Well, I think it's difficult because often it happens at the same time. Even research now trying to come up with the stats that you gave at the beginning of the program, how much time they spend on each of those will add up to more than 24 hours because it's happening at the same time. I would go the other direction and say you need to spend an hour outside playing, you need to spend an hour doing chores to help around the house, and whatever's left.
Okay, that's a good thing to say. Can you actually, can you make good on that?
We do at our house.
You do? Boy, you got to share some secrets on how you make that happen. Allison, what about it? Can you do that?
I think you can do it. We did it with television. No, it was a constant struggle. I think the lessons we learned from the phone ringing at dinner time to TV going all the time are the same lessons you learn with the computer.
Mike?
Yeah, well, and just in our sample size of 1, our daughter is now grade 6 this year, so it's the first really serious homework time. And we have normal homework hours, the same as many parents. And during that time, there's no technology allowed at all.
But do you have rules that say if you want to use the computer, if you want to play video games, you have to get outside and do a chore, do an errand, do something fun?
Yes, and it would depend on the child as well how much that's needed. But absolutely, that would be a good thing to do. And kids understand rules. They really do. As long as it's clear to them that in order to get the hour on the video games, you need to have the 2 hours outside.
Okay. Last 20 seconds. You want to give us some advice?
I would just say, monitor it very carefully. Sit with your child when they're on the computer to figure out what they're doing and ask them questions about what they're doing, just the same way you would when they're going outside to play.
Julie?
And I would say use it as a learning tool.
Always the best advice. Okay. Can I thank Mike Dover, Allison Armstrong, Julie Mueller for being with us today? That was really helpful. Appreciate it. That's it for today, but our guests, of course, are going to be sticking around for a post-Q&A program. If anyone in the audience has questions, please stay with us. We're going to post those questions and answers online. Along with this discussion, you'll find it at tvoparents.com. tvoparents.com. You can also watch this program, Your Voice, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on television on TVO. From the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics in Waterloo, Ontario, I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching.